Everything DISC 363. That's going away in June. Wiley has partnered with Kuznets and Posner, the LPI. I'm not quite sure. How many of you guys have heard of the leadership practices or the LPI, the leadership challenge? Margaret, no. Mark, no. Okay, Alice, yes. Esther, have you heard of LPI? I'm going to try to get all of you guys on my screen here.
Yes, but that's one of the reasons why I wanted to come today, so that I can learn more.
Okay, perfect. Oh, and Mary. Hi, Mary. How are you?
I'm good, thank you.
Good.
And I'm familiar with that as well, but didn't know anywhere to access it. So I'm glad to be here. So yeah, thanks, Tanya.
Okay, you are welcome. All right, well, let's keep going. Quick agenda here. Love this thing. Become the kind of leader that people would follow voluntarily, even if you have no title or position. I think one of the reasons why feedback programs such as this is very, very important is the last 2 years has uncovered a few things in the industry. I think a lot of businesses are still reeling from that. I know in Des Moines, there are still, especially in the hospitality industry, where all of those positions are not filled. I think that alone, it makes it very, very important as employers. How do we retain? How do we attract top talent? And how do we retain it? And part of that is your leadership. It falls on leadership and the culture of the company. Okay. So LPI is one of those programs that approach that, that mindset in a very intentional, positive manner. Okay. All right, quick agenda today. Oh, I'm sorry. And I'm pretty laid back. If you have a question, throw it in the chat. Kelly, if you will just monitor that for me, please. I owe you lunch. If you do that, and just let me know. Okay. All right. So why this topic? Okay. The practice, we will review the practices of exemplary leaders. Leadership inventories. So there are several different LPIs, or I'm sorry, there's several different 360s out there. Everything DISC had one, that one's going away. We also have another publisher that publishes a 360. After reviewing all of those, we've found that the leadership challenge is a very, very positive way to approach something that can be very difficult to go through, unfortunately, and can cause a little bit of angst. Okay. The LPI 360, it also has elements that you can spread throughout the organization. You don't have to be a leader, and you don't have to use it in a 360 model to have it make an impact within your organization. And we'll talk about that here in just a little bit. We'll do a quick everything DISC overview. I'm a facilitator. I'm a certified LPI coach. I'm also a certified facilitator with everything DISC, workplace management. And I believe in connecting all the dots, using all of the tools that are in your quiver, so to speak, to make sure that whatever program that you're presenting or whatever knowledge that you're presenting, you can help whomever you're trying to help connect all of those dots. Okay, so we'll do a really quick everything DISC overview, because I think most of you work with us in that area, in the DISC area. Okay, and then of course the so what's, and then what's next. Okay. All right, part of any 360 is it really truly is rooted in becoming more self-aware, having that leader or that person that's going through that program. How do we help them become more self-aware? Okay. I think about what we've experienced, not just within the last 2 years, but just think about the last 10 years, the last 15 years, and how things have changed in the workspace, right? We have industry disruptors, not just the pandemic, but other industry disruptors. Like, this is the first time in our history where we have 5 generations all working still in the workforce. I'm part of Generation X, and I think Generation X, we are kind of special. We've had it both ways. We know what it's like not to have all of this fabulous technology that's at our fingertips, but we have also learned how to utilize and how to embrace some of that. And roll our eyes at some of that technology as well. But my children, they're Generation Z, sorry. This is one of the first generations that have really been immersed in technology from the time they started school, the way they learn, the way they receive information. So that itself is an industry disruptor. We have what the last couple of years where our workforce is still, for some reason, there's a lot of open positions, and we have folks that aren't afraid to change jobs, that great resignation, job switchers, job changers, because they're trying to find a place that they feel accepted, that feeds parts of their soul, as well as they just feel like they fit. Okay, so why do people follow? Okay, so why does somebody find a place, say, hey, I really like it here, and why do they continue to stay? Okay, in the chat here, go ahead and why do you think people follow? What makes a really great leader? And I'm not talking about executive leadership. I'm not talking about the CEOs of your company, but when you talk about the friendships that you have, social relationships, work relationships, why do people follow other people? Trust, value and understanding. Yep. Value, respected, empathy, right? To be inspiring. They feel seen and heard. Yes. How many of you have been working for an organization where you've participated in an employee survey, or you've participated in a 363, you've been asked to be a rater, and you've taken the time, you've given them your honest answers, and you felt like, okay, they didn't hear anything that I've said? Have you been, I know I have. Yeah. Anybody else? Yes. Yeah. Oh, that's awesome, Margaret. So often when we do 360s, or when we work with clients that do 360s, it's part of a PIP plan. And from all of the research, the knowledge that I've gained being in this position, that's almost the worst time to have someone go through a 360 is when you've got them on a performance improvement plan. Why not do that 360 early on? So they know, okay, I'm in this position. How do I need to become better, right? Because there is a 2008 Gallup study, and you guys have shared a few of these in the chat here. People follow because their leaders establish 4 things: that trust, compassion, stability, and hope. And when I was putting together the slide deck, I looked up that Gallup study again. I wanted to see, had they revisited that? Has that changed? There's several articles that those are still 4 of the values that people are looking, followers are looking within their leaders. Okay. And it's great when followers can tell you what they need from you, but it's better when you can fulfill it. Right? So really listening to what that feedback has showed you. Where are my strengths, and where do I need to get a little bit better? Okay. I think it gets to be a little bit more difficult to articulate that as a follower. One, there's barriers there. Not necessarily intended barriers, but there are barriers between giving your leaders feedback and how do you do that, and how do you do that successfully? Okay. Part of that is creating that culture. To be a good leader, you need to know what your employees need from you. And that starts with weaving a culture of feedback and where you feel comfortable giving that feedback in a positive manner, even if it's negative feedback. Okay. Part of that is, or one of the ways that we can do that, one of the programs is called the Leadership Challenge. The Leadership Challenge was created by Kouzes and Posner. Oops, sorry about that, guys. Hang on for just a second. Kouzes and Posner. Okay. Their research was conducted almost 30 years ago. The 6th edition is in 2018. I just received an email from them. They've made some updates. I'll be attending a webinar at the end of February to find out about those updates. They are, oops, I just lost part of my slide deck. Okay. They created the book. The program around it is facilitated workshops, coaching guides that go along with it. And it is self and the observer sessions. And it circles around, or it centers around 5 practices. Okay. The research, again, was revisited in 2010 and then again in 2022. So I am very excited to see all the updates that they have, or any updates that they have. But the practices were developed to be non-generational. Okay, so you can apply this from boomers to millennials, and it talks about how it manifests themselves. It varies by generation. Okay. All right. Everyday people. So the second book here is that Everyday People book, observing the practices outside of the traditional leadership positions. You can be a leader regardless of your title, role, or authority. Okay. Kouzes and Posner's research identified the 5 practices of exemplary leaders. The first one is model the way. The second one is inspire a shared vision. The third is challenge the process. And 4 is enable others to act. And 5 is to encourage the heart. Okay. We're going to go over each of those, each of the practices here very quickly. Okay. First one is model the way. The description of model the way is everybody's a leader, whether you supervise people or not. Titles don't make a leader. It's how you behave that truly makes a difference. Model the behaviors expected in others. Okay, so model the way. When we think about that and we pair it back, or we connect it back to DISC, there's different ways that we're going to model that, right? It's going to manifest itself in different within different behaviors and different approaches. The associated leadership commitments, you're going to clarify those values. So finding your voice and affirming the shared ideals. Again, pairing it back to DISC, what does that look like? There are some of us, depending on what our communication style is, our voice is very, can be very soft, and others can be very, very loud. Okay. And then how do we affirm those shared ideals? Second, set the example. Oh gosh, I'm sorry. Set the example. So how do we align actions with our shared values? Okay. And again, that's going to manifest itself in different ways depending on our communication style. The second vision, or the second practice, is inspire a shared vision. The description of that, based on Kouzes and Posner, is remaining focused on the long-term vision and constantly reminding others, often when they become discouraged, of the ultimate outcome and how important this was. Okay, having absolute total belief in the visions and dreams of what could be. Circling back to the DISC styles, there are some people that are going to embrace that, and it's going to be a natural thing for them to do. And there are others that will really need to be intentional about how do I inspire that shared vision. Okay. And then be confident in your ability to make extraordinary things happen. Okay. The associated leadership commitments envision the future, imagine exciting and ennobling possibilities, enlist others in a common vision, appeal to those shared aspirations. Okay, I can think of a couple of different styles that are really natural at doing that. You want to follow them, and others that have lots and lots of questions around that. Okay. The third practice is challenge the process. Description, every personal best leadership case involved a change from the status quo. So think about what we are experiencing right now in the workforce. Okay, there is a huge change in the status quo. Be a pioneer, venture out, And then don't sit idly by waiting for fate to smile on you. Okay. So for some of us, again, that is a natural thing to do. And for others, we really need to flex, and we need to be intentional about that. The associated leadership commitments, searching for opportunities. You're going to seize that initiative. You're going to look outward for ways to continually improve it. Okay. Experiment and take risks. Constantly generate those small wins and learn from each experience. Okay. So when I think about taking risks, there's a part of my personality that's like, woohoo, let's go jump out of that plane. There's another part of me that's like, oh no, why am I going to jump out of a perfectly good airplane? Because it gets me from point A to point B. Okay. The fourth practice, enabling others to act. A grand dream doesn't become a significant reality through the actions of a single person. It requires a team effort. And then you want to lead by empowering those around you, right? The associated leadership commitments, you're going to foster collaboration, which means that you build trust and you facilitate those relationships. Again, how you do that, there's so many more elements in how you build trust, okay, and how you create those relationships. The other leadership commitment is you're strengthening others. You're increasing their self-determination and you're developing that competence, right? So leaders, they want to inspire others to be great as well and to keep rowing the boat, so to speak, in the same direction. And they want to stay in that boat with you. Okay. And then the last practice is encourage the heart. The description of that, people become exhausted, frustrated, disenchanted, and are often tempted to give up. Genuine acts of caring draw people forward. Recognition is the most powerful currency you have, and it costs you nothing. So as a leader, how am I going to encourage and how am I going to recognize acts, whether it's acts of kindness, acts of service, something that propels the company forward? Am I doing that, and how am I doing that? And then encouragement is serious business because it's how you visibly and behaviorally link rewards to performance. Okay. And then the associated leadership commitments, you're recognizing people's contributions. When I feel appreciated and I feel like I'm part of the process, I take ownership in that and I want to continue. If I own it, I want to be there. You're going to celebrate the values and the victories. So you're going to create the spirit of community, a sense of belonging. Okay. All right. Any questions about those 5 practices? Okay. All right. So we are going to just take a quick peek. I had mentioned DISC. How many of you use DISC? I know, Mary, you use DISC. Esther, you use DISC. Alice, you use DISC. Mark, Nexstar, big DISC. Yep. Margaret, do you use DISC as well? Yes. Okay, great. So there isn't anybody on here that doesn't. So when we think about how we're connecting it, oh, okay, why is that? There we go. DISC and the 5 practices of exemplary leaders. What are some ways were you guys making those connections as we were going through the 5 practices to what you know about DISC? What are some of the connections that you guys made for these 2 programs?
Is it okay to unmute?
Oh, yes, please. Yes, please. I love feedback. I want to get this conversation going.
So the one thing that I recognized in a lot of this was, where are the core values that surround the DISC itself, right? Like collaboration is a big thing that speaks to it. And that's what I noticed is that a lot of these things are just different languages for everybody who falls within that, where their DISC leads them. And so that was the big thing that stood out to me.
Yes. Yeah. You can see DISC and all of that knowledge weaved within this program. And I believe the partnership between the Leadership Challenge and Wiley that occurred 7 years ago, 6 or 7 years ago. So it's still a new partnership. The Leadership Challenge has been around for quite a while. but it pairs so nicely with the knowledge of DISC.
Yeah, I think some of these practices will come more naturally to certain DISC styles and others. Encourage the heart. Well, gosh, that sounds like an S, challenge the process. Well, I don't know. That's sort of a DC kind of a thing. So, but you could see where you could really do a lot of good coaching, because some of these may always be a little challenging for somebody depending on their natural style. And I, use the workplace, everything DISC workplace profile. And and I do a lot of coaching, and I find, some of these things was a coach may always be a challenge for you, and other things you don't think twice about. So I like this connection, really, Tanya. This is great.
So and when we were looking at the leadership challenge, because when Wiley had let us know last year that they were getting rid of the 363, and we were looking for a replacement, so to speak, something that paired very, very well with DISC, this just stood out. And I know that it's a Wiley product, but we also have another publisher that publishes a 360. But when you think about these 5 practices, and then you connect it to all of the research that's out there beyond DISC, beyond the leadership challenge, what organizations are searching for those. And I'm putting quotes around followers, the organization itself, what they're looking for in leaders. It's the 5 practices. And then when you pair it with DISC, what are those practices? Some practices are going to come very, very easily, and other practices are going to take a little bit more intention. I need to work on this, but then how can I use my superpower of DISC to do that, right? And then, so these 2 things, they absolutely pair well together.
Well, they dovetail very nicely if we also think about some of my clients are going to want to know the research base behind both DISC and leadership challenge. And these are, decades built on decades of research. So that's another advantage to these, like, oh, okay, that's great. Versus it's just somebody's idea of what makes a good leader.
Yes, absolutely. Because there's a lot of programs out there that have popped up, and especially a few that we have heard of in the last couple of years. I think the content is sound, but these 2 programs, they have decades of research behind them. And the leadership challenge, it's been around for a while. DISC has been around for a while. So yes, there's all of that validation and true research behind them. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So the 5 behaviors, they manifest themselves in all of those DISC styles. They just look differently. So when you pair these 2 things together, if you're coaching your leader or you're weaving it throughout your culture, because this program, it doesn't have to be a 360. They have that individual assessment that will help that individual see, of these 5 practices, which ones come very easily to me, and which ones might I need to be a little bit more thoughtful about. Okay. And then imagine how truly exemplary a leader could be if they learned how to use the practices when working with any DISC style, and they were self-aware. How is this manifesting? If I'm a leader and I'm an I, how does that manifest? Right? There are certain things that are going to be more difficult, but I am committed to these 5 practices. So how am I going to become very good at all 5 of them? We talk about in DISC, one of the elements of DISC, especially Wiley's DISC, is it provides a common language, or helps organizations build that common language. So when you're talking about communication, interaction, personality, you all come from the same place, hopefully, or you're all discussing it and talking about it from the same place. The leadership challenge program, that will help you do the same. You've got these 5 practices. You're talking about those 5 practices. There's elements within each of those 5 practices. So what does it mean to model the way? What does it mean to inspire a vision, encourage the heart, challenge the process? So you're also building in another common language when you're talking about leadership practices. Okay. You guys are all familiar with DISC, working effectively with each of these styles, that common language that gets built, and the priorities around each of those DISC styles. When we're connecting the 5 practices to DISC right away, and you guys, we discussed this just a moment ago, there are certain styles that are going to be naturally stronger at some of the practices than others. Okay. And when you're doing the 360, when you're doing that feedback where you've got raters, you're able to see that. And I think there's power in, if a leader's doing this, if you're doing this, whether it's in a PIP plan or it's part of an overall leadership program, that can be very, very powerful. How am I making a difference? How am I making a connection within my organization? Within, and I know a few of the organizations that you guys work with, attrition. Oh, bye, Esther. I think she already left. What are you seeing in terms of turnover, employee turnover within your organizations? And you guys can unmute yourself, please, or you can put it in the chat, whichever you're comfortable with.
Being an I don't mind talking. So I would say that in our organization here at Nexstar, that we're well, similar to what Alice just put in there. We're about 18 to 20% as far as our turnover, but we are a business coach company. And so we have a lot of members that we coach throughout the US, Canada, Australia, the islands. And the industry of home services it's almost about a 65% turn.
Wow.
Globally. And it's just because of some of the struggles of leadership, which is why we've started to getting so involved into behavioral understanding and behavioral coaching as well.
So when you talk about the leadership practices, are there certain elements of leadership that you find you hear over and over and over again that's missing?
Within our members or within our organization?
Either or.
Okay.
So I'm very familiar with Nexstar. So
yeah,
either or, because I have a feeling it's probably very similar.
Yeah. So within Nexstar, we're very good about employee engagement, reaction, engagement without responsiveness is just death. I mean, there's nothing to it, right? So we're
Right.
extremely focused on making sure that we're responsive to the feedback that we get. And we stay engaged and we find ways to incorporate a lot of the behavioral elements that you were discussing here. But as business owners, because we coach business owners that have, home services, right? Where somebody's coming into your house to fix something or work on a problem. And unfortunately, a lot of those technicians have come into business ownership because they didn't like the corporate mindset, and they're terrible at connecting with their team members. So they're learning this right now. How do I do this better? And the beauty of it is that, and what is inspiring for me, from my perspective, is that there's a lot that want to actually, like, they see the need, they're wiping off ignorance, and they're wanting to actually get better with that.
So, which is very, very good to hear. So very, very good to hear. Anybody else? And Alice, you said, oops, I'm going up. So Alice, you've got about a 22% attrition rate. Your children's hospital, it's been rough. The medical industry, oh my goodness, the last few years, I can't even imagine what it's been like. We have, of course, clients in the health industry, and hearing some of the stories have been very, very difficult. What are you, normally, and again, you guys have been so taxed over the last couple of years, but when you do exit interviews, what are you hearing? What is part of the reason why somebody's chosen to leave your organization and find employment elsewhere?
Well, we do, pay is one reason. We're a nonprofit, and so it's hard for us to compete in our market in Birmingham. We have a lot of hospitals, a whole lot of hospitals, probably way more than we need. We're the only children's hospital, but that's one of the things. But also, since the pandemic has kind of been ramping down, I don't know if y'all are aware, but children have been getting sick. So we have had, children didn't get sick during the pandemic, but after it, they did. And so we have had our highest inpatient counts in 30 years. We've had to go on diversion at least 3 times in the last couple of months, and we hadn't been on it but once in the past 30 years, which means we had to say we can't take any more patients. You know, like, and that just hasn't happened. We just don't do that. But the nature of our business, but we had to, because there was no place to put them. It would have been unsafe. So that people just got burned out, and they just left to go do something else. I think some people probably left the profession. So we had greater demand, and we can't fill the demand, and we're having constant turnover as well as people leaving. So
Yeah.
it's been hard.
So, and Margaret, you work with nonprofits as well. The nursing staff, the turnover in nursing staff is, oh, I'm sorry, you work with nonprofits. Mary, you work with a healthcare system in Columbus. There are some elements, of course, that nothing that you do, you can have the best culture, the best organization, and there are just some elements you can't overcome, such as a pandemic, such as trying to get your nursing staff, all of your medical staff through certain periods of time intact, so to speak. But I do believe if there is a strong culture, and I have worked with and I have heard of, believe it or not, some organizations who have leadership that mentioned that culture is not a thing. Culture is not real. There is no such thing as organizational culture. And I find that surprising, to say the least. But I do believe that it makes it a little bit more difficult if you have a great culture for some of those folks to leave. Again, there's elements that you have no control over. But I know you had mentioned the pay. Do you guys find that, and I'm recounting a conversation that I had with my youngest son, who's getting ready to graduate college in microbiology. And I was like, what are you going to do with this degree? And we were talking about pay and him going to grad school, and, hey, make sure that if you go to grad school, you're finding a position in which you're happy. And I said, we were talking about money and salary. And he said, well, yeah, I really do want to make a decent living. But he said to me, Mom, it's going to be more important to find a place where I'm happy, where I like going there. I like working at the organization. He goes, yeah, money is important, but it's not the most important thing. And I remember when I was growing up, getting into the workforce, you found a good job that paid well, you stuck with it, whether or not you felt like you were being heard. I think things are changing. Leadership is changing. They're embracing some of these, they're listening. You need to create that culture where people feel like they're part of it. They own it. They're appreciated. And they, oops, sorry about that. I thought I had turned off my, this is what happens when you don't have a leash. When they've created a culture in which it's very embracing, okay? And it has a little bit of something for everybody, okay? The LPI, and we're gonna finish up here shortly, it's 11:40, but I'm really, really excited about the leadership practices inventory because it has both elements. Again, it is part of the 360. Okay. So it's one of the most widely used 360 leadership assessments out there today. Okay. There's also that self-instrument. So you don't even have to put someone through the LPI. Let's say you have an emerging leader and you want to get them started on this path because you're weaving the 5 practices within your culture from top to bottom. So there's that self-instrument, there's the 360. So you can add that in. And the way that they have built this, you can start with that self-assessment. And then let's say in a couple of months, 4, 5, 6 months, a year, you want to add in the 360 piece of it, you're able to. We just add the raters into that. Okay. The 30 item instrument, it measures the frequency of those behaviors on a 10-point scale. Not only do the individuals who take this assessment, they gain perspective into how they see themselves as leaders, but of course, how they're viewed. Okay. And then hopefully it gives them, this program is set up to where it gives you a clear path to help them. Okay, what do we need to work on? How do we need to raise those scores? And it gives you a nice path forward. Okay. The difference between LPI and some other 360s, and for those of you that have used a 360, what 360s have you guys used? Did anybody have a chance to use the Everything Disc 360? No?
I used that one.
Okay. And Alice, what did you think of that? Did you
It-
like that
it-
one?
It was very complicated to debrief with somebody, and it was most people, not all. I had some that didn't have trouble getting others to complete it, but because it was so long. Some people would have trouble getting the responders to respond, and so that was difficulty. It was a rough one to use, to
Okay.
be honest.
Well, and the LPI, it has all of the workbooks. It has the path forward planned out for you. So that's a huge difference between the Everything Disc 363 and this LPI. Okay. So you've got the workbook, you have some additional learning that they get automatically that you can build into either the workshop, the coaching, however you're rolling this out, or however you're working with the individual with this plan. Okay. It's backed by more than 30 years of empirical research. It's part of that self-discovery leadership process, right? So it's all about that self-awareness. It's a journey, much like the DISC. It approaches leadership in a measurable, learnable, teachable set of behaviors, again, much like DISC, and it gives you all of the items to help you do that. Okay. Good methodology. It's very simple, but it's very powerful, and it speaks to, again, what's out there, what followers are saying they want in a leader. Okay. All right. So key organizational objectives. The LPI experience, it's consistently proven to generate outcomes, positive outcomes, because it builds that common language and vision around goals and values. So you can build in the vision of the organization within using those 5 practices. You create that climate of trust. Okay. So that innovation and creativity. Hopefully you're going to be able to recruit and retain and nurture key talent. Okay. Not just leadership, but if you can create that culture of, here's the 5 practices, we've bought into this, we live this way, this is part of our organization. Hopefully you're going to retain some of that top talent and keep it. Okay. You're going to improve efficiencies, hopefully overall performance, which then gets you those bottom line results. Okay, through collaboration and teamwork. Okay. Not what I call mom speak, just do it because I told you so. They're going to want to do it because they want to contribute to the overall success of the company. Okay. Leaders make a difference. Leaders who engage more frequently in the 5 practices of exemplary leadership are more effective and successful than those who do not. People working for or with these type of leaders feel more committed, powerful, and influential within their own organization. And the organization as a whole benefits from the positive outcomes. You've got job satisfaction, you have that retention, you have a commitment from your employees, and then overall higher performance. Okay. How can the LPI experience benefit your organization? You're more engaged. Okay. They take responsibility, hopefully, for their personal and professional growth. They perform with a greater passion and purpose. And then hopefully they are working on fostering that loyalty and commitment to the overall goals and values of the company. Okay. Again, you're using DISC to continue to build that collaborative and high performing teams. Okay. So now what? Any questions before we get to why you should continue to use us for the LPI? Oh, Mary had to run. Okay. One of the reasons that you wanted, if you're thinking about doing a 360, and there's several out there, and I encourage you to do your due diligence, do your research, find the one that works for your organization. But the LPI, as Mary was saying, the Wiley LPI, there was a lot of moving parts and pieces. I'm not saying the LPI 360 is necessarily the simplest LPI out there, but it is a lot more simple. Okay. It is very easy when you get that report to read it and to start using. Even without coaching, you're going to be able to read that report and start understanding some of those elements of that 360. Okay. There's 5 practices versus 24 practices and 8 approaches, which is what the Wiley DISC 363 consisted of. 24 practices within those 8 priorities. It focuses on the behaviors of leadership, not actual styles. Okay, so when we're thinking about connecting it to DISC, this isn't necessarily about your leadership style. This is about the behaviors that feed into your leadership style, that shape your leadership style. Okay? And it shows exactly where the leader has strengths and possible developmental needs. Okay. It is not what I call a smackdown 360. So those raters aren't able just to write anything they want. There are specific questions that will be asked. There is a section where you can add some comments, but those will be viewed by the coach or the person that's presenting the LPI. Okay. And then of course you connect it to any DISC style. It's adaptable to any of the DISC styles. Okay. And then of course, hopefully, as you guys have worked with us, some of you have worked with us for years, hopefully we provided you with some amazing administrative support. And we offer that with the LPI as well as coaching sessions. So there's, I'm a full-time staff member. I've been certified to be an LPI coach, so I'll be able to answer any of those questions. We also have another master trainer that is a certified LPI coach that can help as well. We can do as little or as much as you need from us. Okay. That being said, what's next? You do not have to be certified in order to use this instrument. So I want to make that very, very clear. Certification is always great, but you do not have to be in order to use it. Okay. Decide if the model fits your organization's L&D approach. Oh, I'm not quite sure why that did that. I'm so sorry. When's the best time to plant a tree? Now. And again, if you're using 360 within a PIP plan, I think that that's great, but I do hope that maybe you visit that to say, okay, how can we use this in a more effective manner? A lot of times when you get to that point where you've got a leader or a person on a PIP plan, you want to avoid getting to that point. Okay. Schedule time with Resources Unlimited if you have some additional questions. And then arrange for a trial. So if you're very interested in this, if I did a good job explaining how awesome the Leadership Challenge is, give us a call. We'll arrange for you to take either the self-assessment, or if you have a leader that you're thinking that you want to introduce this to, let me know. We can send you the sample reports as well. Okay. All right. Any questions before we go? Before I let you guys go? Anything? Nothing? Okay. I'll follow up with you guys if you have any questions about the LPI. And again, there's research behind it. There's a path forward. You've got all of the workbooks when you purchase the assessment. So that's not something that you have to do separately. It is an all-encompassing program. Okay. All right. Alice, Mark, thanks for sticking with me. Do you have any additional questions about this at all? Okay.
No, none. I really appreciate it though.
Okay, great. If there's, if there's anything Next Star wise, or Alice, the Children's Hospital that you guys want to do within the LPI framework, just let me know. Okay.
I will. Thanks so much.
All right.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you for joining me, guys. Have a great Tuesday.
You
You
too.
too. Bye-bye.
Bye. I'm gonna stop recording this.